Hey everybody, how are you? It's Wednesday, it's 7 o'clock. I thought about maybe I should play that mystical song, Here I Go. That's old school, for some of us anyway. How are y'all doing today this Wednesday? I hope y'all doing good considering. I hope that everybody is safe. I hope you are healthy. I hope you are thriving. I hope that somebody gave you a hug. Hugs are healing. So I really do hope that for you all. I am going to check and see who's actually joined in. And before I get into my topic for tonight, and reading through the material before I got to this point, I'm going to be honest with you, I was really exhausted. I was exhausted at just some of the things that I've read from the articles about the young lady in Michigan. She's not even a young lady, y'all. To me, she's like a baby, a teenager. She's 15 years old. So you may have seen a few things posted, or maybe a few things that might have circle its way onto the news, if not the news, at least on social media. And there's a few groups that are advocating for her to be released, as she should be. And so I wanted to talk about it from the context of everything that has happened, that has taken place so far up to this point, and also just the many points in which there was an opportunity for someone to intervene and use some level of, better discretion to handle that situation. And furthermore, she's still sitting in a detention facility, a juvenile detention facility, on basically a technical violation. And it's simply because at this particular point, the judge absolutely has the discretion to do so. Her name is Judge Brennan in Oakland County, Michigan. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, y'all. And I want you all to weigh in because, thank you, Kevin, because I think it's important for us to really understand what is different from when I was growing up. And also, and what I mean by that is the level of distraction. and throughout this case, you can see where the internet and her being on the internet was such a huge part of some of this taking place to the detriment of her. And I don't really think we factored in, as we start thinking about resolutions and as we start thinking about how we're going to, intervene with our kids and support them during this time, how big of an influence the internet is and how ever present it is and how its content overwhelming, let's say that, to say the least, and how as an adult I could spend hours on social media or the internet, if not really paying attention to it. So I could only imagine how you as a youth, as a teenager, could really get consumed with all the information and everything that you can explore on social media. So I just thought that was hey, Pauline. Hi, my faithful friend in Mississippi. Thank you. And so I think we're like, 5 minutes into it. Let's just jump into it. So in Michigan, there's a young girl, a teenager. Her name is Grace. And she is incarcerated in a detention facility right now. And I seen it kind of come up a little bit, but I did some digging. And so essentially, Grace is your average 15-year-old girl. Her mother name is Sharice, and she is about 44 or so. I think now, I'm not quite sure how old she was when she had her. But she is a single parent, and Gracie is the only child. And at some point in her teenage, development, she started to do what most teenagers do, which is kind of exert their independence and also just kind of establish her individuality. And so there's sometimes teenagers do what teenagers do. Now, she and her mother had gotten into a space where they were having some back and forth. Up until that point, it appears that Gracie has done well in school, or at least not have any behavioral issues, if you will, just your normal stuff that people have to do to test the waters, especially kids at that age. And she's involved with, her church activities and school activities. She doesn't seem to have a problem making friends. She's involved in whatever parts of her community as it relates to her mom and her church. She went off to a 6-week camp. So she doesn't seem to have, been withdrawn. But what the article does state is that she had some learning challenges as it relates to her being easily distracted. They named it as ADHD. I think personally that kids are overdiagnosed with ADHD. And I think that that's part of the problem with some of the things that especially Black kids go through. And I'll get into that in a little bit. So basically, an argument escalated between Gracie and her mother, Sharice. And at that particular point, it got physical, whereas Grace, shoved her mom, and there was this incident in which the police was called out. Now, the weird thing was, once the police did get there, they discovered that she had an iPad from school that she had taken without her permission. So I'm not quite sure how, if I was Grace, I wouldn't have told on myself. So I'm not quite sure how that got figured out. So that was her first instance with, stealing, and then also an assault against her own mother, which, let me just be clear, that's not cool. It's not right. Hey, James. And I will say this. I don't know where that comes from, but personally, Helen, which is my mother, sweet Miss Jenkins, just the thought of me in any kind of way trying to rile back up at my mother and be physical of any sort makes me, like, my life flash before my eyes. So I don't know if that's the kind of parents you had, but that's definitely that was not even like, I got mad enough to be like, ooh, with my mom, and even maybe have thought about it like, ooh, I wish, because like, if you're going to be honest, be honest. We did at that age, but never would I ever, never. And so that's just the case with that. But nonetheless, that situation did happen. Police was called. And so at that particular point, she did receive assault charges from what I understand. So the state, I guess, decided to charge her with assault. And then she also had another incident shortly after that, sometime in November, and she was placed on probation. But then she had this second incident, and it was all about electronics and a phone. So basically, she had stolen a phone from school because her mother had taken her phone, behavioral issues and things like that. Her mother had taken her phone, and she wanted her phone back, and so she stole the phone from somebody at school, And then at that point, and again, not right, but you thinking about the processing of a 15-year-old, child at this point. And so she was in such a need for a phone. So she's upset with her mom. They're in, I guess, the driveway or in the car. They're having this fuss and match. Her mother yells, help me, help me. A bystander calls the police. By this time, she's reaching Grace into her mom's car, grabbing her phone, and also bit her on the finger. So police was called. They took her to a family friend just to cool off, which I thought was, a pretty good thing to do. And then the next day, she was actually brought, in for this particular charge. So she had larceny. She was brought in for larceny because the person's mother, whose phone she stole, pressed charges. She got the phone back, but she pressed charges. And let me just say this real quick. I had an incident. Hey, Daniel. Hey, Tiffany. I had an incident. What's up, Robert? I had an incident where my daughter had an issue with somebody at school who became physically violent at the high school level. And once I had to go out there, at that point I could have, pushed the issue. My daughter did not hit her back, which is something I clearly would have did when I was at school, just to be honest with you. But she, had a lot to lose at that time. And so she didn't. So I could have pushed the issue about pressing charges, and I did not. I made it very clear to the, administrator, like, let me tell you something. Don't she's going to not ever put her hands on her again. Let her mama know I'm not going to do anything this time, but that's something she needs to reel back in, because if she continues on without a consequence, that's going to get worse, but be very clear. I don't want her talking to her, none of that. And if it happens again, then, you're going to leave me with some really bad options. So, in those instances, if it was me, I don't think I would have pressed charges if I got the phone back. I'd have been like, hey, write me a letter, write her a letter, saying something, but I would not have pressed charges. I'm just going to be honest with you. So anyway, she did. And she was on probation, and she also was on an ankle monitor at the time, which is kind of weird. During this time, the pandemic took place. And so during the time where she was going to have a court date, as well as, for these new charges, as well as, the pandemic happening, school, she had to do homeschooling. That was an adjustment for her, as it was for everybody. That was an adjustment for. So essentially there was some statistics that were showing that in many of the states, a good 50% of the students were not even logging into homeschool and virtual learning. So there was some challenges that we could not plan for. And so I think everybody was just really trying to do the best that they could. And a lot of us fell short. A learning opportunity, but nonetheless, a lot of people fell short, including, teachers, parents, the students. We just could not figure that out. The administrators, the school board, the whole nine. And when we did figure it out, it just took some time. So if it took some time for the adults to adjust, quite naturally, it would take time for it to work itself out with younger kids. And so with Grace, it was the case. So at some point, she had a caseworker, of course, because she also had an IEP. If you are in education, you recognize what that is. And essentially, it's somebody who handles your case. It comes out to kind of make sure that the areas where you are deficient or have a trouble learning in school, this person is there to support you along with the school administrator, whoever that person is. And oftentimes there's also an educator who teaches them specifically at a slower pace. And so they allow for them to, take time on tests, take time to turn in their assignments. They also understand that there's some challenges with grasping concepts and learning things. So they also take their time with them. And so could you imagine taking that setting and then moving it to home where you don't have that one-on-one anymore? And you have somebody like a parent that is now responsible for taking over that level of one-on-one in education for a child that has a special need. And so that was an area that also went lacking in this case. And so as a result, she was trying to make an adjustment. This caseworker put in her notes, hey, listen, she's having some challenges, but nonetheless, no different than anybody else. Then what happens, y'all? Hey, Brian, and no child should ever raise their hands to their parents. Nope, they shouldn't, and they do, and we're seeing it quite often. That starts when they little. Don't start trying to tell them that at 12. Nope. But on to my point, she was struggling with that, but the new caseworker came in after the old caseworker, I guess, left. But she said, hey, there was some challenges we needed to work out, but, she's doing okay. The teacher at the school who was doing the virtual learning was like, hey, she's on, for the most part, she's in line with whatever the other students are doing in terms of keeping track of her work and everything else. Well, at some point, a part of her restriction was also not to get on the internet or whatever the case may be. And I don't really understand personally why that was a condition of her probation. So no internet, which I don't know how you do that for a teenager, in what capacity, with some reasonable limitation, without completely taking their devices. I don't understand what that was all about, because a lot of people, if she's going to need a computer to get online, then the temptation is going to be like right there. But that's just what they did. And also, she, like I said, she had an ankle monitor. So she's logged on, she's doing her assignments, and at some point she starts to fall behind because she doesn't have that one-on-one. And as her mom expressed to the courts, as well as the caseworkers, that she had issues with being distracted and, having ADHD, just not being able to keep up unless somebody is really, guiding her through those things and staying on top of it. So when the caseworker checked in, this is the feedback that was given from her mother. But she also heard the feedback that, she's kind of slipping because she's falling asleep, and she's not turning in her assignments because she's on the internet or whatever all night. That was the word. And that the next day her alarm didn't go off, so she didn't wake up to do her virtual learning. So her mother was going to get together a plan to make sure that she moves her desk up in the front with her, and which I think probably should have been done already considering she had learning deficiencies. But that was the plan. So, we just kind of taking it a step further to try to help her out. Well, the new caseworker got involved with not that history, not even sure she read the notes. And when she got that information, she filed a violation of probation, which in essence, it was basically a technical violation. And let me be very clear about how detrimental technical violations are to people who are on probation, not only just, young people, which it's almost a guarantee they're going to violate it, especially young people. But for people who are adults, it could be the slightest thing that can really put you in a jam. And sometimes people don't follow what they should. And there are times when people are doing the best that they can. And I think as an opportunity to help somebody be successful while they're on probation, I don't think it should be looking for ways to penalize them, but looking for ways to make sure that if they want to be successful, that they are in fact successful on their probation. But oftentimes it's just much easier to violate a person, put the paperwork in, and then starts the rigmarole. It's really a beast once you're in it. So that's just that. So anyway, she filed the technical violation, but she followed up with the teacher after the fact, and the teacher was like, "Hey, she's not having any problems. She is staying on top of her work." But by this time, it was too late. So this gets in front of the judge, and the judge basically, admonishes her for her past assault against her mother. She talked about her past history of behavioral issues back in like 2017 and 2018. And because of that, not taking into consideration the changes that took place with the pandemic, in addition to the new caseworker, which obviously there was a loss in translation and history, she detained her. And her mother had to see her put into handcuffs there in the courtroom, and she was detained into the facility. And Stephanie said, "I've read about this, and I think the judge should be reprimanded, sanctioned, or something. This is an obvious bias under the extreme circumstances, and because of the IEP, this was a disaster." I agree. It was already a recipe for some level of prudency that didn't take place, and here she is being detained. Now, the not weird thing, but the coincidence is that like probably about April, the governor issued a mandate saying that the juveniles who were not there for serious or violent type of crimes, to let them out, be released because of the risk of them contracting COVID. So about 90 plus juveniles were released into the custody of wherever they were staying, either it was a parent or, foster home or whatever the case may be. So for that to take place and people were already released and she was already out, in at home on probation, not in the facility after the governor issued the mandate, the judge then said, "You know what, it's a good idea to put you on in the jail." Straight like that. So that's what happened. So she's been in there since. The judge at the time said, and so did this caseworker, they believe that she would have access to, more, focused therapy, as well as being able to get the things that she needs to be able to be quote unquote successful. Now, anybody who knows, and this is where the disconnect is. First of all, social workers, for the most part, I don't know if they tour to jail. Y'all tell me. You know somebody to do it? Let me know. I don't know when the last time judges or even defense attorneys, for that matter, prosecutors, anybody else has actually visited these facilities to see what actually takes place. Because really, it's just a housing place for them until they decide to release them. Some of them do have intervention programs, in which I believe that Grace was on one at some point, and her mother recommended it, not knowing. And I think she just was feeling like she was out of options, which she did state that she didn't have anything else to do, but she was trying to prevent incorrigible behavior, but it just made it worse. And so these are the things that happen to young people, specifically black girls and black boys, once they are deemed to have a behavioral issue. And nobody's really looking at the totality of the picture. And what happens is they're penalized, and their circumstances are not treated with the level of support and care that they need. And unfortunately, they are then pipeline into the prison pipeline. So it's really essentially in some ways a school to prison pipeline, but this is just a part of the system that plays a part in directing that, and not re-examining things that can be done for certain communities and certain kids to be able to help them stay out of the system. And they believe that these intervention systems or these the diversion programs are actually working. And I can tell you probably a good small percentage is working. I believe they need to be reevaluated to really consider the complexities of what these kids have to go through at this point, especially now. So anyway, little Grace is in jail. And y'all, she wrote the sweetest letter to her mom. I have a link to all the stuff I'm talking about. I'm going to post it in my post. And it made me really, feel bad. You can tell that she's in jail and she is processing, what she did and what, how could she be a better person, which was her word. She really wants to be a better person. And let me just be honest with y'all. I'm a whole grown adult. And there's just times when, I really am trying to make that shift. Now, I'm at a point in my life, thank God, that I know better. But I also came from an environment where, that was a nurturing environment, as well as a lot of my nature. I was deemed as defiant. Let me just say this. Let me just put this out there. In middle school, I got a lot of referrals. My daughter's sitting in here, and I don't really want to say it in front of her. It's too late because I can't take it back. I got a lot of referrals, and they were because I was defiant. That was always that she's defiant. And thank God my mom was kind of like, listen, she wanted to really shift that in the right direction. She didn't want to break my spirit. She didn't want to take my autonomy and my ability to have my own voice and question things that I did not think was right. But at the same time, she wanted me to make sure that I would follow the rules and be respectful. So I was always getting this thing where I was defiant. I'm so glad I'm still defiant to a certain degree, because I would not be out here off a 20-year sentence if I wasn't. In addition to a whole lot of other things, but you get my point. So, so that's Grace. Hey, Joshua. So she is in, detained. She is not getting the therapy. Now, when she was home, she was getting therapy twice a week. She was also getting therapy with her mother, and then individual therapy. So it was like family therapy and then individual therapy. And then she was getting the help that she needed with her schoolwork. Since she's been incarcerated, she has had therapy, I think, once or twice the month that she's in there. She's been in there. She's been in there for 2 months now. And they are sending her packets of work from school. She is stating that the work that she is doing is below her level, and that she needs work that's at her level. So she's not only not getting the therapy she needs, she's away from her mother. She is also not being able to keep up with the level of work, which is what she needs to be at. So all of this is as a result of her being detained, incarcerated, and jailed as of right now. So help me understand, where is this helpful for anybody at this point? The judge has decided to keep her in custody. So on Monday, she went and before the judge on a motion that her defense attorney submitted, and it basically was to ask for her to be released, and that it was better for her to be home. She could get all the things that she needed to get, in addition to the risk with COVID. Obviously the little girl is really having a hard time with it. She's depressed. She in her letter she wrote, I wanted to write you before, but I couldn't because every time I started to write my mom, I started crying. She's very capable of articulating what is going on with her, which I do like because she seems to speak up for herself. And I'm going to tell you personally, I think that's an issue with the judge because she is able to vocal and she's polite about it. She's like, can I please say something? And she speaks up on her behalf, which is why it's so important for me and all of us for us to speak up for Grace as well. Because apparently, her mother, other advocates, as well as her voice is not being taken seriously. And I want us to understand that this is much bigger than just Grace. And I say that all the time because you have to understand that there's research, I'm going to tag it in here too, that shows that school, expulsion, suspension, and other zero tolerance policies affect Black kids more, and specifically young Black girls. And I can only imagine, like 15, with all of this going on in the pandemic, you got your menstrual cycle, like it's a lot going on, and we already are like in our little hormonal stage. Some of this just, I think, is taken way out of context. When the judge locked her up for this technical violation, she did not have a new charge. It was seriously just her not completing the work. And so instead of putting some measures in place to measure when she in fact did turn in her work, then this step was just to violate her probation. And so the judge said on Monday, when she denied the Grace's defense attorney's motion for her to be released, the judge stated she was not detained because she didn't turn her homework in. That's what the judge said. The judge said she was not detained because she didn't turn her homework in. She said she was detained because I found her to be a threat of harm to her mother based on everything I knew. Now, while she was on probation and at home, she had not had any incidents with her mother. They had not had any issues, and she was following the conditions of her probation. She had not violated with a new charge, a new assault, or anything else of that nature. And yet, the caseworker, the probation officer, was like, "Hey, I'm gonna violate you because you didn't turn your work in." But the judge is like, "Hey, I didn't decide to detain you because of that. It's a possibility that you might assault your mother again, just based on some other stuff, not what's current, not everything I know about your history." And her mom's like, "Hey, I'm good. Like, we good. I just wanted to come home. This is harming her." But she's like, I know better than you. And let's play devil's advocate. The judge has been sitting in her seat for however long, and I'm not quite sure what she was thinking when she stated that. But let's go further on into the article. She also states that she felt that she was blooming there. She's blooming. And Grace is in a little program, which I'm grateful for, but I really want her out where she can learn how to groom dogs and some other stuff. And the judge had the audacity to tell her, "You're doing so well in that program," which she is, "but the dogs need you, truly." Okay. So Grace is sitting behind jail, behind bars, because the dogs need her. And she's blooming quite well, because the judge would know this because she sits in there all day and watches and gets these wonderful reports of how well she's doing on her program. The program could be another couple months, so she could quite possibly be in there a few more months. And as a result, she's not going to continue to get the therapy that she needs. She's not going to continue to get the support that she needs in the level of her education. Obviously, y'all have to understand, prison, jail is harmful. It's separation. It's detaching from human connection in a way, and it's very hard on the psyche, let alone other things physically. So I wanted to basically share with you all those particular things, and I'm also going to share with you all a report where this is taking place all over. There's a report that states that about 3 to 4 times African American girls and boys are 3 to 4 times higher in terms of being incarcerated for behavioral issues. So the rate that they're incarcerated for any technical violation or any other issues with that is 3 to 4 times higher than their white counterparts. They are also not given the opportunity to, like this particular situation, to just stay home and modify the conditions of that work piece of it. I think it was a bit unrealistic to have somebody in the middle of a pandemic, like, be like, you can't like get on the internet, and although she has to be online. So I thought that was very strange. I'm going to put all the links into that. These reports also come with recommendations on what to do, and it's gone back as far as 2013. So this is nothing new. Question is, what are we going to do about it? Like, there's people who've done the work, done the research, done, case studies and different things like that. And they have said, hey, this is some solutions we should try. And yet we're trying to recreate the wheel. Lord only knows why. I think this is important because this is our youth. They're our future. They're our future. And this kind of stuff is only, making it more difficult for them and really, really channeling them towards imprisonment and incarceration and brokenness, and that affects all of us, not only just them and their family. It affects everybody, and anybody who's complicit in that system who does this, prosecutors, judges, public defenders, whatever. We also have to be able to really talk about these situations that are egregious and go against the grain. When the judge was going to violate her, the prosecution at some point decided, we agree. Well, she was already violated, but when they asked, can we let her out early on Monday? The prosecutor was like, yeah, we agree. Judge said no. So that's what's going on with Grace, y'all. It is insanity, Ruby. It's bad. It's y'all just look at the articles. I'm gonna post them. Just read them. It was difficult for me to read them, so just share about it. And I wish we could send her some mail. Anybody know the information on being able to send her some mail? Let's post that. I'm gonna also post the 2 reports. One is a school to prison pipeline report. One is talking about direct file. And another one is talking about how black girls are unprotected, pushed out, and over-policed. And it gives you all this information that I think is worthy of exploring in terms of what is actually taking place, not only just in Oakland County, Michigan. It's happening here. Anybody ever went to juvenile court? It's something else. It's something else to see. And I just think that we need to make sure that we are really, putting our hands around our youth. They are they are our most precious asset in terms of, reeling up a community and a generation of people to really, carry this world forward. And it's just not showing, to me, any mercy on some of the things that they have to endure that Lord only knows. I'm not saying not hold people accountable, but what I am saying is to make sure that when we do so, that we teach them and we guide them. I don't believe that these kids are incorrigible. And not only that, they did not hatch, they were born. And they did not decide at 6 months, when I turn 15, I'm going to jail. That is not how that happened. So let's just do that. And before I go, I want to bring over little Miss Rihanna for y'all. My baby will be 10 tomorrow. Come over here. You got to come. Can you see her? Yeah. Huh? Kinda. Stand up. Come up here on this right here. This is, you got her? Yeah. This is Rihanna. Rihanna's going to be 10 tomorrow. So y'all wish my baby a happy birthday.
Thank you.
She's trying to sound innocent. She's not. Y'all, I'm going to post that information later on. Y'all have a good day. Peace out.